Wow, praise the Lord. This is kind of a retro step backwards rather than step forwards. Sort of. You see, we're recording this VidDevo, our lunch and learn menu, so to speak, from a Orbit Sphere camera. A camera that I used, exclusively since I first started VidDevo, probably 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And it's not the original same camera. I think I smashed 2 or 3 of them up along the way. But when we first started VidDevo, we used what's called the Orbit Sphere Logitech camera. It's one of those round ball cameras that stands on a long stem. You know, it kind of, there's only one. No one else makes one like it. So if you've seen it, you know. But if you haven't, well, it's kind of weird. But it's got a Carl Weiss lens in it, and it's really was so designed by Logitech that they tried to get rid of it because it was such a quality camera that after a few short years, everybody kept buying it. They tried to promote other cameras that were lesser quality, and they'd make them, you know, like more convenient by, you know, little clip-ons and things like that. But people were so enamored by this camera that finally Logitech had to keep supporting it. And as usual, the techies won out, and to this day, there's still support for the Logitech Orbit Sphere. And they made no real improvements, but it's been a quality camera. Now this one that I'm using, particularly, it's kind of been smashed, beat up. Even the plastic that covers the lens is kind of like filthy. But it reminds me, as we're first day of spring, going in a different direction, that the Lord has done some spring cleaning in our ministry, that though I've gone out and bought a camera that can record, you know, like, well, I can look up on the top of those mountains over there at the Wasatch Mountain Range and see things on top of them. It's like 150 proof, you know, or 150x, whatever. And, you know, and then digitally enhanced also. And I can pick up sound from, really, if you look behind me, all the way across the way, I could whisper. And that microphone that's got kind of like a telescopic digital enhancement can pick up behind me the sounds. So we use it in VidDevoChurch at the outdoor venue at Highway 89 and Main Street, as well as in Bountiful up at, I think it's East Hagel Park or something like that. But anyways, we use it outdoors a lot. And we can't use the Orbit Sphere because it's kind of wobbly and I have to be careful with it. But since we moved the office into our dining room and changed the dining room into an office and then plant room and everything, and since spring has sprung and the outdoor venue now that we have on the porch is available, we started using Orbit Sphere, and I've been thrilled. It's amazing when God does something, because I can tell you when I pray about going to the store, you know, I'll say, well, there's one thing I want to get, and I'll tell my wife, we're going for one thing, and I'll go get it, you know, and it'll be there. And then she'll say, well, how come every time you go to get it, it's there, and when I go to get it, it's never there? And I'll say, did you pray about it? And she'll say, well, no. And I'll say, well, that's the difference. Or like, I have in my mind for a few days something I want to get, and then I'll pray and say, Lord, when it's time, let's go find this. A good example would be the screen door we put up, but, you know, I'll say, well, let's go find something. And sure enough, when it's the Lord doing it, it'll be there. And I'll find it, and it'll be a good price, and I'll be willing to pay that price because I'm pretty frugal, or cheap, as the case may be, when it comes to spending money. I always figure it's the Lord's money, so I want to spend it the right way and, you know, be as available to get as much as I can, more bang for my buck, so to speak, because I'd rather use some of the money for other reasons than just simply some of the getting by or ministry things or practical things that we all use money for. But when God did some spring cleaning when it came to VidDevo ministry, yum. Remember, this is lunch and learn, so got to eat some lunch. By the way, this is because people love recipes. This is a really hard recipe to do. White, instant, minute rice. And a can of sardines from Costco. That's in, I think, olive oil. My wife found some. They're not your normal cheap sardines, but they're pretty good because when you open them up, they look like little fishes rather than, the normal sardines you see that are just like little, well, anyways, they look bad. So, drown it in soy sauce and bingo, and butter, and bingo, man, I'm in heaven. That's my breakfast and lunch. So this is kind of like our breakfast lunch thing. But when God did spring cleaning here at VidDevo Ministry, he took old things and brought them forth as new things. He brought us back to our first love, which was the VidDevo Ministry, to share devotionals in a peculiar way, a unique and distinctive way, but a way that reminds us that God is as real as you want him to be. In other words, God would be completely obvious to us if we would open our eyes to see. Now, if you close your eyes, obviously you can't see. God would be as personal and real to us as we open our ears to hear what he has to say. I don't mean read the Bible. I mean open your ears to hear what he has to say. Just a minute or two ago, well, even right now, I can hear the birds singing in the background, and I know that that's a God thing. It's a God appointment. It's God revealing through his creation, offering to him praise for what that life as a bird is doing. Now, you may not understand the language of the birds, but hey, maybe you should play a Dr. Doolittle for a little while and ask God to reveal it to you. You may be surprised if God decides to answer you, and you're shocked out of your shorts about what goes on in real life as opposed to what goes on in your practical life. Because you see, real life is the life of the Spirit. As many as are led by the Spirit, they are the sons and daughters of God. And God wanted me to return to my first love in explaining that and relating that to people that don't deal with God in a personal and real way. They assume that God's not involved in their day because they walk around with their eyes closed. Or they don't think God is speaking to them because they walk around with their fingers in their ears. I mean, when you got your thumb in your mouth and your fingers in your ears and your hands covering your eyes, you may see no evil, you may hear no evil, and you may speak no evil. But guess what? You may see no God, you may hear no God, and you may know no God because you haven't really asked. You haven't really listened. You haven't really sought to see God in a personal way. Today, speaking of seeing, I need to put some glasses on. In our Lunch and Learn, we are talking about the entrance of thy words gives light. Well, that's interesting. Or, as you go in, how you speak, in other words, gives light. What you say is what you get. What you are is revealed by the mouth of what you're saying in your words and the way that you arrange them according to what you speak. Meaning that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And that's from Proverbs, is that a lot of times when you want to understand human nature, all you have to do is listen. I mean, if you go to any self-help group, the first thing they're going to tell you to do is get involved in a group and then listen. And when you listen, you'll hear people talk. And when people talk, they reveal more about themselves than what they think they reveal. Oftentimes when counseling sessions are done, and if they record it, a person who watches themselves speak is even surprised by how revealing that can be. That's kind of the reason why programs like 12-Step or any other program that you talk about where there's social intercourse, meaning people communicating back and forth, someone will identify with something being said, and then they will contribute their part by speaking, by verbally giving vent, as it were, or voice to what's going on inside. That's what the proverb means when it says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. David talked about, or one of the prophets talked about how he couldn't keep silent, that the very words that he wanted to keep, quiet about burned within him to where he had to speak. And that was, of course, God telling him to speak, but it works the same way in human nature. Even non-Christians getting upset or a person getting so emotionally involved has to vent it. Most of the time you'll see, like in an argument or in a loved one's emotional response to being provoked, you'll see two people that really love each other say things they claim they don't mean. But really, deep down inside, there's something stewing. There's, as it were, in deepest recesses of the heart, something that hasn't been resolved. And it comes to the forefront, and in anger is spoken, maybe with too much emphasis, and maybe it's not the overriding, emotion that the person has for that other person. But in an argument, they'll say it, because it'll just come flying out of their mouth. And in some ways, in a small way, they might mean it. Sometimes it may be in a big way. And that's why a lot of times emotion is a bridge that people use to get out what's going on inside. Sadly, if you leave it inside, sometimes actions speak louder than words, and a person that gets so frustrated will, instead of venting through speaking, will take an action that may be negative or may cause consequences they never intended. We used to say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And the reason why that's not in the Bible is because it's not true. My family grew up with sarcasm, and we could kill each other with a word. I mean, we used to cut each other down regularly. From the moment I was born, I was learning sarcasm. My mother was a truck stop waitress, and we learned how to communicate through sarcasm. It was horrible. So when I became a Christian, I had to unlearn most of what I learned. But I did learn one thing from that experience. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, and the words can kill. So you have to be careful about the words you use. You have to understand that they have meaning and power, and they do reveal a lot about yourself, as well as the nature that you are. That's why it says, the entrance of thy words giveth light. That means that really the words you're using, it's revealing something, and it's really revealing you. So this is the message that we have heard of him, and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. God, who commanded the light to shine out of the darkness, has shined into our hearts, to give light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. The Word was God, and in him was life, and the life was the light of men. If, and it is an if, we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another, and the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from all sin. The reason why you really need to focus on that last part is because when somebody exposes you, or you are exposed, obviously you're seeing more than you want to see. Needless to say that if someone exposes themselves to me, they may be showing more than I want to see. TMI, too much information, is also TMS, too much, or TMR, too much revelation. Don't show me everything you are. I don't want to see. Cover it up, please. Dare I say that me being an older man, there's a lot of guys that I would say, put a shirt on. Frankly, I used to laugh at this pastor that I knew when I was working as a missionary helping him, that he'd go jogging and he'd take his shirt off, and I'd go, oh man, dude, you may be in perfect health, but you're also an old man, and frankly, that don't look so appealing. If I get that old, I don't want to look like that. So I'm skinny, and I still look kind of like I've got my middle age and old age kind of appearance, because I don't exercise. I'm not going to build a six-pack on something that's going to one day yield, the fact that this body is not who I am, but rather the spirit within me is what God has intended from the beginning to be revealed by the love and the peace and the joy I have. But what we do know is that if we are in the light and we start talking to each other, sharing truths, revealing how sinful each one of us are, we need to have that blood of Jesus Christ cleansing us. Meaning, you got to recognize that Christians are sinners. Christians are hypocrites. You are a sinner. You are a hypocrite. You are a liar. You are unrighteous. The way God says that is that there is none righteous, no, not one. Everyone has gone his own way, and he has laid upon him the sins of us all. Meaning that Jesus, because of what God was going to do in restoring a relationship with him, put all of our future actions, past actions, and attitudes of today on, literally, Jesus himself, so that we could at least find forgiveness. Now, the Bible does say you need to ask, and if you don't ask, of course, it's like what we said at the beginning. You could walk around with your fingers in your ears and your hands covering your eyes and your hands over your mouth and know God, because you don't look, you don't see, and you don't hear. And that's kind of obvious. Well, same thing's true about if you don't ask for forgiveness, you don't get forgiveness. If you don't give grace, you don't get grace. If you don't love, you won't be loved. I mean, that's kind of obvious. Just ask any woman. She didn't, like go, oh, I got to go get that man. No, some man pursued her, and says, hey, I love you, and then she says, oh, really? Well, show me. And then he does, and she responds. Well, that's kind of a bad example, but in a poor way or poor man's analogy, that works in some ways. A dog, unfortunately, that's abused will still love its master. That's sadly another form of love. But the kind of love we're talking about when we say about being in the light with Christians is to reveal to each other your fallibilities so that you can be forgiven of each other. So that when you fail, you'll have a brother who will stick closer to you than your actual physical brother. He will be someone who will help you through your struggles that you're going through in life. So walking in the light isn't denying who we are. It's accepting the fact that what we are, how we are, is sinners, and that the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from every sin. And so, thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against you. You were clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Jesus taught us a lot about how to get along, but he also reminded us that we would not, for in the world we would have tribulation. But he said, be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. And the way that he's done that is through that love that's demonstrated through the words that he said. Read what he said in the Sermon on the Mount. Read what he said anywhere in the letters in red. Read what Jesus had to say, and you'll find yourself living in a way that changes you, and you will change people around you, whether you say anything or do anything. The very fact that you're light will affect those that are, unfortunately, maybe living in darkness either inside themselves or making that darkness on the outside very obvious by their actions that they're doing. You were sometimes darkness, but now you are the light of the world. You were children of darkness, but now you are children of light. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, but more importantly, a peculiar people. That you should show forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Just remember that when you get in the light, as he is in the light, and that you're, getting together with people you fellowship with, some people fellowship in a bar, some people fellowship in a church, some people go to a self-help group, some people will join a school or be a part of a assembly of some type, maybe a political party. Remember that if you are the Christian, you're not just salt of the earth and, throwing salt on people, trying to, fester their wounds by, putting salt in a wound. But whether you say anything or whether you do anything, you're a light. And you, literally, as a light, will be there even when things that you don't want to expose are exposed. Because you once were just like everyone else that was in darkness. You couldn't see, you couldn't hear, and you couldn't speak like you ought to. So because you now have moved into the light, You should examine ways that you're listening a little better than what you were before. You should examine ways that you're seeing things a whole lot better than you used to. You should examine things the way that you react to them and react or act accordingly as Jesus has said we should, because you are in the light. Being the light, you don't want to be a flashlight that's on batteries. You want to be a lamp full of oil that is burning brightly, even like a lighthouse, that where there is danger, you're there as a light, warning the ships in the night that, hey, there's rocks out there, be careful. You see, a lighthouse doesn't say anything. A lighthouse is something. A lighthouse doesn't shout out a beacon, and says, warning, rocks. They may have a foghorn that when there's fog, they kind of let that go. It used to be popular. Nowadays, not so much so. But still, you get the idea that you don't have to state your case every time that you're any place, but rather you just have to be, as God has said you already are, a light. So if you are in the light, then just be the light. Be enjoying the fact that you once were in darkness and now you're not. You can choose to simply live your life. And even as that old little cute song used to say, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, a light that's shining doesn't have a whole lot to say, now does it?